Hi, I'm Dr. Beth Molleson.
And I'm Dr. Alyssa Watson.
Thanks for joining us here in the Veterinary Breakroom, where we have short conversations where we chat about relevant topics in veterinary medicine. And today's topic was inspired by a publication that I saw recently. It's called The Prevalence of Behavior Problems in Dogs in the United States. It was published in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior. Some of you may have seen it. I know I saw it floating around social media a little bit. And part of the reason that it, I think, has gotten some press is because of the startling 99.1% of dogs who were found to have behavior problems. And I'll get into defining exactly what that means. Alyssa, have you seen this going around at all or not till I sent it to you?
No, actually, I've seen it going around. And the thing that I found interesting about this was not even that it was circulating, because like you said, it was a veterinary journal that published this, but it was cited by several, major news organizations as well. And that's where I first saw it. So it wasn't in my veterinary circles. It was actually, something I can't remember what it was, Forbes
Sure.
or something like that. But some news organization, Washington Post maybe, had the big headline that, over 99% of dogs have behavior problems. And I felt like the byline, could have been, in other news, like summer's hot.
Right. Exactly. I know. Some of us are not as shocked as others, I'm sure. I'll give a little bit of background about this. And of course, we will post the article in the show notes. I encourage everyone to check it out because it really was pretty interesting to dive into the details. It was data from pets enrolled or dogs enrolled in the Dog Aging Project were basically the pet owners from these dogs were surveyed. There were 43,000 dogs that were included, which, it's just really interesting. This Dog Aging Project, for anyone that's not familiar, is basically a data bank of dogs. This project was intended to be kind of a community science study that follows changes, all sorts of changes in these dogs, lifestyle, nutrition, similar to what's being done in human-related research, like with Women's Health Initiative. And it was also to look into mortality and aging and human aging. I know there's been some support from non-veterinary organizations into this. So just a little bit of background on where these dogs come from. But it's fascinating because, when you try to find statistics on behavior issues in dogs before this survey, so many of it was limited data sets and data sets that were skewed by dogs or pet owners that sought help from veterinarians or sought help from veterinary behaviorists. So it's really interesting to sort of collect information from pet owners that were brought to this survey, not because they were seeking out resources for behavioral issues or anything like that, but just owners who were interested in enrolling in this project. So like I said, 99.1% of dogs showed at least, this is how they categorized it, at least one problem that was moderately serious to serious, so ranked on a 3 to 4 on sort of a seriousness scale from 0 to 4, or dogs that had at least two problems that ranked from a 2 to 4 on that scale. So, Alyssa, I was tallying up. I was like, all right, in my household, how many behavior issues do we have? I've definitely got one dog that's ranking a 2 to 4 in all four of the categories that were involved. But did this surprise you to see this number at all? I know, a little bit about your background. Obviously, in the clinic, we all see dogs with behavioral issues. A lot of us have owned dogs with behavioral issues.
Yep. Yeah, we've talked before about our dogs that have some behavior issues. I guess anytime something says 99%, that's going to be kind of a shocking number. And I think that, that was the reason it was picked up, in the headlines for these major news organizations. When I break it down, though, and just like you said, when you actually define what that means and the broad category of different things that owners are perceiving as behavior problems, then I'm not really surprised because these are really a broad range, and especially in severity of things, all the way from barking, things that we might consider normal behavior, all the way. But if it's in excess, or if you have an owner that finds that disturbing, then they would rank it higher, all the way up to things that where I consider, behavior issues that are very serious, like, aggression or fighting between animals in the household and things like that. So there's really such a huge, broad spectrum of things. Inappropriate urination, and, I think was one of them too, that I'm not surprised, because it's just encompassing such a large thing. Of course, yeah,
You're
99%
right.
of dogs are going to have something going on.
Yes, I was gonna say there's a whole host of areas, as we all know, for things to go wrong in the behavior. I mean, not just dogs, humans, you name it. So the categories, you're right, are endless. My initial reaction was a little bit the opposite of yours, where I was like, oh, I'm gonna dive into this, and this is gonna be like anybody who marked that their dog barks and they don't like the sound of barking, or their dog peed in the house as a puppy is gonna be on here. So I was a little bit pleased to see that they did have to rank at least a 3 or a 4, or two problems having a 2 to a 4 to count. Um, but I also want to dive into the categories, Alyssa. I'm going to have a little quiz for you, because I was a little bit surprised on where these all ranked. So the way the survey went down was they had 4 big categories: aggression, separation and attachment, fear and anxiety, and house soiling. And then there were some additional sort of miscellaneous questions. And under each of those 4 categories, there were a series of questions. So just with those 4 categories, how would you rank those in terms of frequency of issue?
So I think for frequency of issue that I see patients being presented, or the things that I think that owners recognize or worry about, I think that owners recognize, attachment disorder, separation and attachment, as well as fear and anxiety. Then probably something like inappropriate elimination disorders. And then, for at least for me, I feel like a lot of my owners are maybe a little bit less in tune with signs of aggression in their pet.
Yeah, I think those are very similar hypotheses to what I would have had. I'm excited to tell you that they were a little bit off from what the data shows. So for those 4 main categories, separation and attachment was number 1. So I think that's what you said. That's not a huge
Mm-hmm.
surprise to me. Um, Next from those big categories was aggression. Um, Next was fear and anxiety, and then followed by house soiling. And to me, that was the big one. I feel like we talk so much about fear and anxiety, and maybe it is because a lot of times those are the behavioral issues that are present when we see these pets.
Mm-hmm.
Again, separation and attachment isn't too surprising. I guess I was a little surprised. My assessment would have been what yours is, Alyssa, where aggression, maybe we're not even always picking up on these signs. I just was a little surprised that this many dogs, or this many pet owners who were surveyed, not necessarily seeking any behavioral help, but listed aggression as a considerable issue in their household. Honestly, it made me feel a little bit less alone, because one of my dogs would rank on that as well. Um, yeah, and then if you add in, I just thought this was interesting information I'll give you. If you add in those sort of miscellaneous questions, we've got separation and attachment as number 1, and then coprophagia, so feces
Mm-hmm.
eating, was, let's see, I'm going to give you the percentage. 73% of dogs are poop eaters. Alyssa, apparently I'm more shocked than Alyssa. She's shrugging at me. Doesn't surprise her. Just
Dogs are gross. Like,
I guess you're right. I just pretend they're not when I let them lick my lips. And then aggression is 3, fear and anxiety, and then number 5 was barking, which
mhm.
that does not surprise me at all. Another thing this survey touched on, I think it actually was referencing another study, but they talked about whether or not veterinarians consider themselves as being the responsible party and helping to solve animal behavior problems. I know that's a topic we could spend a lot of time on, but I was surprised to see that over 98% of vets report that they consider that to be their responsibility. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I agree with you. The that number did surprise me. You
Mhm.
know, um, I I do think I tried to like relate it back to me, and you know, it's one thing that I think is part of our job. I think we I wonder if it's more like, am I projecting onto the owner that like I think they're assuming I should solve this problem? And so that's, and the other thing that they said was that a lot of these veterinarians, they felt like this was their responsibility, the same way that I do, but that they didn't really receive adequate education on ways to manage this and how to deal with this. And I see that over and over in social media and in discussions with colleagues, especially because there seems to at least be the perception, I don't know if it's true or not, that a lot of these behavior issues have worsened since COVID and since many of these animals were possibly brought up with a lower level of socialization than they had prior to COVID. And there's
Mhm.
so many hypotheses about that and studies out there about whether or not we think that these issues are actually increasing in incidence or not. And it's nice to have this baseline data. It would be really, really interesting to have had survey results from 20 years ago to see if owners still felt in the same place. And I think a lot of it has to do too with just the changing way that animals have been invited into our lives too. 20, 25 years ago, it wasn't uncommon for a dog to live outside,
Right.
in a kennel,
Right.
in an area, and now they sleep in the house and they're much more engaged and interweaved into our daily lives, which also presents a lot more opportunity for
Yeah.
these behavior problems to cause an issue.
Right. And 20 years ago was that scenario. 5 years ago, it was a lot more
Hmm.
common to have dogs left home alone for 8 hours a
Hmm.
day than it is
Hmm.
now. So, how much is that biasing our results, not only from the have our dog's behavior actually changed, but exactly the point you were making, have our observational skills changed? And now, because we are staring, some of us, at our dogs for 24 hours a day, are we picking up um, more of the behavioral issues? That's an interesting question too. But it is really exciting to see sort of what opportunities the Dog Aging Project is opening up in terms of learning more about this, because I do think it is just one of those things where the more information we have as pet owners, as veterinarians, how we really can utilize that to, um, inform what we do. I know if you think about 99.1% of the dogs that walk into your exam room, the pet owners are dealing with some level of behavioral issue at home. How does that change how we interact with our pet owners? Are we inquiring more? Are we trying to help with solutions? Going back to that question of, is it our responsibility or is it not? I think regardless of how we feel, the reality is that a lot of times we really are the only expert touch point for those pet owners. So even though we may not have all the answers, we may still be the closest thing that they have to improving the human animal bond through improving pet behavior. So yeah, I think it certainly, seeing all these statistics, gave me more empathy for the average dog owner. Like I said, certainly made me feel less alone in my own house. Another takeaway, certainly good market for any veterinary behaviorists out there, anyone who wants to become a veterinary behaviorist. The issues are plentiful.
Plentiful. Yes. Or if you'd like to write a nice, concise handbook of educational handouts, that's another thing. I would take that in a second.
Right. Yes, that maybe more resources are needed to help
Mhm.
guide pet owners, and
Yep.
yeah, just sort of gives us an earmark of, again, what pet owners are dealing with, and maybe what conversations we should be sparking at home, how some of these things impact, our treatment plans, all that good stuff. So again, for anyone interested, we will link it in the show notes so you can check it out yourselves. But Alyssa, I think that might bring us to the win of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have an odd win of the week, but my win of the week is today I have tried multiple times like to just absentmindedly go put on my deodorant, and I have remembered not to because I have my own PSA this week. I know oftentimes our medical PSAs are from you, but I have my own PSA this week, and I am getting my mammogram today. So I can't wear any deodorant because that's the thing they tell you not to do. So it's important to everybody to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and getting those annual checks, especially for us ladies that are 40 and over.
I'm very proud of you, Alyssa. If there's one thing I like to encourage in my friends, it's to go to the doctor more often. Not afraid of a good diagnostic or screening test. So that's a good win. My win, I think, will resonate with you, Alyssa. As one Disney girl to another, I am going to Disney next week. Disney World, I should specify. This is the part that makes me sound like a true crazy person. I'm going for one day. Two of my friends and I are flying down in the morning, going to Epcot all day, flying back at night. So please judge away for anyone that is not a Disney adult. I also was not a Disney adult about 4 months ago. And then I went in January and I said, why not? It's great escapism from the real world, and really easy to fly there from Cincinnati. So just going to go have a day of fun. And I'll report back. So hopefully it'll be a win on the other side as well, and everything will go smoothly. Please pray for no flight delays.
Yep. No, I'm super excited about that for you. I did know that you were doing that because you had mentioned it, and it sparked something. I'm not going to fly anywhere because it's too far for me to fly there. But I was thinking, I'm like, I could probably get up at like 2 a.m. and make it to Disneyland by rope drop and do a day and come back. So,
well,
I might model it after you.
If I can encourage one person to be as crazy as me, I will be proud. It is a thing people do. It's called Out and Back or something. I had never heard of it. Certainly judged people that when I did first hear of it, I was a little judgmental, but now I'm fully on board. So I'll report back. But yeah, it does make you wonder where else you could go in a day without the hassle of packing and all that.
Yeah.
But anyway, to everyone listening in, we appreciate you being here in the break room with us, and we will catch you next episode.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for joining us in the Veterinary Break Room. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including the video version on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. You can also listen to or watch our podcast episodes on our website at cliniciansbrief.com/podcasts, or drop us a line at podcasts@vetmedics.com. Veterinary Break Room is a Vetmedics production, produced by Alexis Ussery and co-hosted by Dr. Alyssa Watson and Dr. Beth Molleson.